Alright, so today I thought I'd do something a little bit different, and I'm just going to go through one of my racks and show you the snakes that I have in one of these racks. And I think I'm going to do this rack right behind me, this one right here. This is an ARS 5040. It's not a complete 5040 rack, it's just a few levels sitting on top of a couple boa tubs. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting just to kind of go through and show you what kind of snakes I have in this rack behind me. Alright, so here is the rack, a couple boa tubs on the bottom, and then the ARS 5040 tubs up on top. So I'll just start with the very bottom tub. I'll kind of show you kind of what I have as a setup here. So I should warn you on this bottom tub, this is actually Lucy, and Lucy is my really big reticulated python. As a matter of fact, she kept pushing and pushing on her big 6-foot enclosure out there on my pool table. And she was not happy at all. I don't know if it was the temperature, the humidity, or what was going on. And I moved her in here temporarily for some cleaning, and she was really mellowed out. And so you can see she's really happy just kind of hanging out in this tub. And the funny thing is, I actually originally moved her out of this tub because she kept pushing on this, and she wanted a bigger enclosure, and I moved her up in there. This girl is probably, I'd say, like 90 pounds and about 17 feet long. She's a really big, she's 50% a Jampea dwarf. She's a white albino reticulated python. And I've been breeding her this year. I'm thinking she's building some eggs because she is getting really big and plump. And I'm not sure why she just decided she didn't like the other enclosure. But I moved her in here temporarily just to kind of satisfy her. She was really pushing, and I didn't want her to mess up her nose. And sometimes retics can really mess up their nose if they start pushing on some of the enclosures. You definitely want to keep an eye on it. Make sure, you know, for retics, you really want to have multiple enclosures so you can move them around back and forth in case they start pushing. So on Lucy, you probably noticed I didn't have any substrate at all, no paper or anything. I'm actually going to check on her probably every single day if she goes to the bathroom at all or makes a mess at all. I'll probably move her back into the other enclosure. So the second tub here that I have, this is where I have my corn snake. I just bought a corn snake just out of curiosity. I was actually doing a YouTube video on corn snakes because I've never actually had one, and this guy is super food aggressive. If I put my finger by his head, he would definitely take a bite at me. But look, take a look at this beautiful corn snake, and look at how much room he has in this enclosure. This is a really nice big boa tub. It's funny, sometimes he'll actually curl up under this little log, but I'd say most of the times he'll go under these little hides here. He fits perfectly under these hides. And I kind of just have him spread all over in a little water dish, and he absolutely loves this enclosure. And when I close it up, sometimes he'll sit right in the front, and then he'll peek out and then watch me work in the reptile room. Alright, so for the rest of these tubs, essentially some of them I actually moved my males over to my females. I have this rack over here, and I'm pairing up all my ball pythons, moving the males around. So I actually have some empty tubs here where I don't have any snakes in them. And then I have a few tubs up on the top that are going to be for my holdbacks. The problem is I have like 7 holdbacks this year, and I don't have tubs for them. So I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with some of those holdbacks. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through these one by one, and this one is the bamboo male. If you're wondering where Bobby lives, he actually lives in one of these 5040 tubs, and it's kind of funny because he's a really big snake. He does not mind at all being in this tub, and it's funny, he'll go back and forth between the hot side and the cold side. What I really need to do is I need to move him up to a bigger enclosure at some point, but he seems completely content in here, no problems at all. So here's another snake. This one lives right next to Bobby. This is my male Scaleless head, 50% het caramel albino. So essentially what I did with these were the offspring of breeding a Scaleless head to 100% het caramel albino. I'm trying to breed these back to actually get a Scaleless head visual caramel albino, and then I'll unload these guys. And for some reason, a lot of these guys have been fasting for quite a bit, and then I recently switched to live rats, and they all started eating live rats. But you can notice on a lot of these, you can definitely see the Scaleless head, a few scales missing from the head of the ball python, and that is pretty much one copy of the gene. If they actually get 2 copies of the gene, then they are a completely scaleless ball python. So here's another snake that I'm not quite sure what to do with. This is actually a spider pied white wedding. It's actually a pied with the spider gene in it. It's a female, and this one's been extremely picky, like an only mouse. So look at how skinny this snake is. I just cannot get the snake to eat for some reason, and I'm kind of debating whether or not if I actually got this one up to size, if I'd actually want to breed this one. It's actually from 2016. So it's actually 3 years old, which is super small for a 3-year-old. And I'm not really worried about it. I go through and offer food every single week. It's a really beautiful snake. It's pretty stunning. The only thing is I'm not sure I really want to breed a lot more of the spider morph. So I'm thinking about actually selling this one at some point. So I have another female here. This is actually a lesser pied. It's the lesser gene with the pied. And the funny thing is, if you actually mix the lesser and the pied, you get an all-white snake, similar to some of the spider pieds. As a matter of fact, that last one, it's kind of an anomaly. I'd say most spider pieds have a little color on the head. This one looks like it's getting a little pink, maybe starting to go into shed a little bit. And the funny thing about lesser pieds is if you look at the eyes are really small. It's part of the morph. They kind of have like these tiny little micro eyes, which is interesting. And this guy has a pretty severe kind of a corkscrew head wobble. I'm thinking there actually might be spider in this snake. This is another one that I'm kind of debating, well, should I keep it, should I hold on to it, or should I just sell it and then move something else into this tub? Alright, so this is my scaleless head male from 3 years ago, my very first scaleless. I bought this as a hatchling, paid like $1,200 for it, and let me tell you, this is where all my scaleless head stuff came from. And I paid quite a pretty penny for this one, but I produced quite a few scaleless heads. He's a pretty awesome snake. He has quite a few scales missing from the head. As a matter of fact, when I bought them, people were really pricing them based on the amount of scales missing from the head. And this one was a little bit higher because it was a really high expression scaleless head. I'm not sure if it really makes a difference if you breed 2 of them together and you get a completely scaleless ball python. It probably doesn't matter if you started with the high expression or not. Alright, so this is actually one of my holdbacks from last year. This is another scaleless head, 50% het caramel albino. And I'm actually breeding 2 of these back to both of my het caramel albino females, which are my biggest snakes. And if those don't prove out, I'll probably use the 3rd one next year. And then as soon as I get the caramel albino scaleless head, I'll probably unload a lot of these. So this is kind of like the 3 I have 3 males that are exactly the same. Number 1, 2, and 3. They're all scaleless head, 50% het caramel albinos. And you can see on this one, this just has one little tiny scale missing from the top of his head. It's definitely a scaleless head because you can look at the vent scale and it's split in 2, which is a good sign that it's a scaleless head. So I have this big spider pied male in here, and this guy, this ball python is the one that bit me the hardest one day. He grabbed me and hung on tight. Look at how big he is, fills this whole tub. Actually, I'm gonna need to move this guy up into a bigger tub too. So this one kind of has a little bit of stargazing. One of the first snakes I bought before I really knew about the spider gene. He's really big, really good eater, and last year I actually bred him. That's where I produced a lot of my spiders from this guy. Produced some really awesome spiders. It's funny because people say if you have a little bit of a head wobble, it doesn't transfer to the offspring, and I found that was true with this one. I actually put it to the test, bred this one. It had a little bit of a stargaze on the head. It wasn't too bad, and all the hatchlings came out fine. It's pretty much just a random chance when it comes to the head wobbles with spiders. So here's another beautiful female. This is actually a pinstripe pied, and you can see this one's actually finally eating. This one would not eat for the longest time, it was driving me crazy, and finally I went to live rats and it started taking them pretty regularly. It's gotten up to size, it's looking pretty good, probably on the edge as far as being a breeder. This is actually 3 years old, so still extremely small for 3 years old, and I was kind of hesitant to feed live when I started, and decided that I pretty much had to go to live rats on some of these to actually get them to eat. So essentially what I do is I'll give this one, you know, a live rat, and then I'll follow up with like a fresh killed or a frozen thawed a couple times. And then I'd say probably in the whole time I've had this, it's probably only eaten 3 or 4 rats that weren't live. And then I always have to go back to live for this one. So here's a couple snakes. I started pairing them up when the female was a lot fatter, and then it went off of food. This is actually my bumblebee crossed with my albino pied male. They've been in there for 2 days. They might be, it looks like they're separated. So this is a really beautiful albino pied. And then in the back, this girl is actually doing better when I first paired them up. She's looking a little thin. I don't think she's actually going to lay eggs this year. And the bummer about pairing them up and taking the chance is that usually when you pair them up and they're kind of on the edge, they usually go on a fast and they stop eating. And that's what happened with this girl. And if she would have kept eating, she probably would have actually maybe laid a clutch of eggs for the first time. 17th. She's actually 4 years old. She's a really picky eater too, alive only. She's kind of lagging behind. And this one is super aggressive. If I keep looking at her like this and keep pointing the camera at her, she'll definitely take a bite at the lens. For some reason, she does not like people at all. Pretty much a really weird random anomaly as far as a really snappy snake on all my ball pythons. But this albino pied, this one's beautiful. I bred this male quite a few times, had some really awesome offspring. Actually produced another albino pied visual at one point, breeding this guy to an albino 100% het pied. So here's another pair that I'm not sure if this one's going to go. This is actually a clown female with my banana inchy clown male. And we'll see if these guys are locked up. They've been in there for a couple days. Looks like someone got in the water and kind of dumped the water all over. And I like to go really slow to see if they're locked up. It doesn't look like they're locked up. Usually they lock up like for the first day or so, and then after that they don't really stay locked for that long. But this is a really awesome pair. I'm not sure if this female is going to go. She actually laid last year. I bred my albino pied to this clown female, got some triple hets. I'm holding back all those triple hets, actually 4 females and 2 males of albino pied clown triple hets. That'd be pretty awesome. And I'm really looking forward to breeding this to this clown at some point and get some more of this. This is actually a banana inchy clown. Really beautiful snake. This is the one I bought this year. I bred it to this one, and I also bred it to my lesser clown. And that one's next. I want to show you that one. It looks like she might lay a clutch of eggs. Alright, so this is my lesser clown. Really beautiful female clown. And this is actually only 2 years old. It's pretty surprising that she has such good body condition and is actually still eating into the breeding season. I'm thinking this girl might lay her first clutch of eggs this year. Really beautiful snake. I paired it with the banana inchy clown male. So if this girl actually lays, I'll get some really amazing clown combos. So this one is my Dinker project. It's a 50% het pied, but it doesn't look like a 50% het pied. It looks really wild looking. Some people say that it looks kind of like the Super Arroyo, which is a Rio. And I've actually seen some new morphs on the market. I can't remember which one it was. I was just looking through some on Morph Market the other day, and it looked really close to one of the new ones. But I'm not sure if it's actually something special or if it's just a really random het pied. I haven't really proved this girl out, but you can definitely tell just from I think she was born last year. Only 1 year old. It's pretty amazing how big she is. This girl is just porking out on rats. Getting really big. Pretty amazing how big she is. Definitely not ready to breed, but I want to breed this with some really cool stuff and see if I can reproduce this. What I might do is I might actually breed this just to a normal or a single gene and see if I can actually just kind of prove out that this is genetic. It'd be kind of interesting. Just some really crazy colors and patterns on the snake. Really wild looking. Definitely looks really unusual for just being a 50% het pied. So I'm actually being kind of vulnerable, showing you guys how my maintenance is. You can definitely see, you know, how I'm keeping my tubs and the condition. I keep on these pretty good, keep the humidity pretty good in the enclosures, and keep on top of any dirty tubs. It seems like it really increases the food response. But this one is actually a female scaleless head pastel pinstripe. And when I first hatched these out, I actually have two of these. When I first hatched these out, these were selling for $6,000. And you know, you're always thinking, you know, should I actually save this and try to use it as a future breeder, or should I sell it and cash in on the project? You know, it's always kind of a gamble. What are you going to do as far as, you know, you're going to cash in on some high dollar snakes, or you're going to keep them and hopefully by the time they're breeding size, the offspring will have some value. And it's I don't know, it's, you know, scaleless head is coming down pretty fast, even the totally scaleless. But I'm thinking if I actually breed this to another scaleless head or completely scaleless, I'll get my money back definitely from this girl. But she is a really high expression scaleless head. You can definitely see quite a few scales missing from the head of this girl. Really beautiful snake. So it's actually pretty big into the scaleless project. This is actually a female scaleless, 50% het caramel albino, just a scaleless head. And this one, I was actually thinking, you know, if I could actually prove out one of my males to be 100%, you know, as soon as you prove them out and they prove to be 100% het caramel albino, I could take two of my scaleless heads, breed them together, and get some completely scaleless caramel albinos right out of the chute. And this girl is another one from last year. Look at how big she is for only being a year old. It's funny, sometimes I have snakes that are a year old and they look pretty beefy, and then I have some that are 2 or 3 years old, not much bigger. It's kind of interesting. It all depends on how much they eat. Really interesting. And you can see on this one, she's got some scales missing from the head. If you can kind of get a close up there, she's a really awesome snake. And even if she doesn't prove out to be, you know, the het caramel albino, it's still a really good breeder for the scaleless head project. Alright, so here's another snake from last year. This is actually, it's pretty much the exact duplicate of the last one that I showed you. That was the scaleless head lemon blast, the pastel pinstripe. And this one looks like she's kind of freaking out, kind of going into the shed. I haven't opened these tubs in a couple of days, kind of look in here. I actually went in just a couple days ago and I spot cleaned and added some humidity and changed all the water and everything. This girl looks like she's might be going into the shed. You can definitely tell she's a little pink on the belly, and for some reason she's all balled up. Sometimes they kind of get a little cranky. Yeah, you can definitely see in her head that if you look at her eyes, she's definitely has cloudy eyes. She's like freaking out. I wanted to show you her head so you can see kind of the scaleless head on this one, but you can see she's definitely kind of going into shed here. She's a really beautiful snake. I don't know why she's kind of all coiled up like that. That's pretty funny. Alright, so I am second to the top row, way up here on top. This is actually another female scaleless head, 50% het caramel albino. And these girls are doing pretty good for only being 1 year old. Not looking too bad. It's funny because they were really picky eaters for a long time, and for some reason, it seems like all these from last year were about this size. I'm not sure exactly. I'd say this is probably close to 1,000 grams, and they're all hitting that 1,000 gram wall. Actually, I think the last time I weighed some of these, they were actually about 800 to 1,000, and they pretty much all stopped eating at the same time. And then I switched over to live rats, and it seems like most of them with a really small little crawler pup rat will actually eat them pretty consistently for the live rats, which is kind of interesting. And it's interesting, I don't know if you can actually see really the intensity and the brightness. And the more I actually look at this, it almost looks like the scales are a little bit different than a normal ball python, almost a little bit more bumpy, and there's definitely more like almost like a different texture on the snake when you add the scaleless head on top of it. It's really, I'd say it's almost similar to the microscale. The microscale, from what I've heard, it's even more intense, where it has, instead of smooth scales like this, it has little bumps all over the snake. And some of these almost seem maybe halfway between a scaleless head and a microscale. Although I did look at the vents on the face, and these are definitely scaleless head, not microscale. All right, so here is another scaleless head. As a matter of fact, I have quite a few scaleless heads that I really held back from last year. I produced a lot, and this year I'm not really producing a whole lot. I think I produced one male, lesser scaleless head, but I'm kind of dialing it back because I produced so many. This one's actually a Pastel scaleless head female. Really looking forward to breeding some of these in the upcoming years. You can definitely see on some of these, it's definitely an interesting, almost like you can definitely tell the scaleless head is affecting the scales and the color and the pattern and the intensity all through the snake. Kind of a really unique look for a pastel. I can't say I've ever produced a pastel that looks quite like this. You definitely tell the scaleless head affects the color and a little bit of the pattern. All right, so here we are on the very top of this rack, on the last tub, all the way up on the top. And you can tell my studio lights almost don't even reach that high. It's pretty crazy. This is one of my favorite snakes. This is actually a female Pastel Pinstripe Bamboo. It's a 3-gene animal. No scaleless head in this one. She was really intense when she was younger. And the older she gets, it seems like she's faded just a little bit. Not quite as intense as when she was young, but she is still a really beautiful snake, really stunning, and I'm looking forward to breeding this one. Believe it or not, this girl is only a year old too, doing really well for just 1 year. Probably one of my best eaters. You can tell she's hissing a little bit. It's funny, some of these snakes from last year, not really used to being held that much, and when I first go into the tub they hiss, but when I pick them up and I start handling them, they are perfectly puppy dog tame. You can tell she's like, leave me alone, don't touch me. But she is a really beautiful snake. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Jason Vink asks, what is the best way to get an underweight ball python hatchling back up to a proper body condition? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, usually, I say in most cases, juvenile ball pythons, especially hatchlings, can eat quite a bit more than you actually feed them. I know some people actually recommend feeding once a week. You can actually increase that to every 4 to 5 days until they start putting on some weight. As a matter of fact, you could probably increase it to every 2 to 3 days for a few meals right in a row until it starts looking really pudgy. You don't want to feed it too much, especially if you're feeding more larger rodents. If you feed too many in a row, you actually risk regurgitation. So what I do is I would feed until, maybe every 2 or 3 days, until it looks like it has some good body condition, to where it doesn't really look ballooned up, but where it looks really healthy. And then probably I would feed every 4 to 5 days, and then until it starts looking maybe a little bit overweight, and then cut back. And a lot of people have this rigid feeding schedule. They're like, you need to feed every so many days or every so many weeks in some cases. And what I really do is I feed pretty much 100% by body condition. Sometimes if I have a really obese snake, I'll skip a week or 2 to get it down to size. And if I have a snake that's looking really skinny, I'll increase the feeding frequency until it's looking a lot healthier. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.